Well, hey, I love stories, and I'm sure you do as well. And one of my favorite stories is to hear the story of the Highlands. You know, this story is a story of faith. It's a story of provision. It's a story of miracles. And God has done some extraordinary things here at the Highlands in these first few decades of ministry. And so we're excited to have Pastor Ken, our founding pastor, join us. And Pastor Ken, we're just going to jump right into it. You were leading a very successful church in Canyon Country. God was doing some amazing things. You've said that it was a deader than dead church, and you've done a lot of extraordinary things. God was doing some amazing things, but then you and Pastor Terry, your wife, decided to move back to the Antelope Valley, to the desert. So could you share maybe a little bit about that part of the process, the journey?
Yeah, why would they trust us with a church that wasn't dead?
Right.
Because we had no real experience. But so we went there, and God began to lead us in how to teach the people about their identity and who they were. And the church just started growing, and we had 4 services. And in the middle of all of that, God spoke to us about just leaving that after 8 years, leaving that and coming out here to the Antelope Valley. And we had no people, we had no money, and we had no place to have a service. We just came on a promise. And so when we finally were able to find a facility, it was a little modular, really well-used, small modular classroom, and they let us use that, and we just packed everything in, all of our supplies, our platform, our podium, our sound system, everything got packed in. We had a team of people eventually that began to help us, but initially there was just very few of us, but we were hardworking people, all on board, everybody giving their all. And so we just found that as we worked together to fulfill the promise God had given us, that the church just started blowing up and expanding. We had no idea. I always thought if 30 people would show up on a Sunday, that I'd been told that that's a good nucleus of people to begin with, a good core team. And so we were hoping that 30 people would show up for our first gathering. And Pastor Jeremy, 126 people came to our first service. And we were just blown away. We were not ready for that. We've never felt like we were ever ready for what God was doing. And so we've always sort of felt behind. We're trying to catch up with what is going on. We've had to really live in faith. We live really more as practitioners rather than theorists, and trying to be theorists about our theology. We wanted the community to see that we actually practice what we believe. And it just attracted people, and the church grew. We went from one building, we had to move into the permanent school building, and then that wasn't adequate. And we found an industrial building on Sierra Highway and moved over there.
So Pastor Ken, walk us through a little bit. You were a portable church, meeting in the school building in East Palmdale, and as you said, 126 people came on the first day, begins to explode over the next several years. So walk us through that move from the school building to your first building on Sierra Highway. It wasn't a church building. It wasn't even it was an industrial building with limited parking. So a little bit about that moving into Sierra Highway, because that's actually where a lot of our church remembers. And they came to the Highlands at Sierra Highway. Long-time faithful members came at the school building, but a lot of more people came at the Sierra Highway. So a little bit about that building.
Yeah, we found this industrial building. They had just erected. It was a tilt-up industrial building, and it was way over our head, cost-wise, and then we'd have to build it out. And they wanted us to sign a lease, I believe it was 5 or 10 years, and that was unheard of in the Foursquare movement for a new church plant to sign that kind of lease and be responsible for the build-out. I think the build-out would cost us ultimately around $400,000, and we were a pretty new church. That was a lot of money. So we went in, and they told us, at first they denied us from the board for Foursquare. They said, no, this is just something we don't do. So I sent a letter back, because I'd actually been on the board of directors, and I sent a letter back and said, our founder, Amy Silpa McPherson, when she built Angelus Temple in Los Angeles, she had an amount of money from her crusades, and she asked the contractor, how much will this build for us? And he said, it will dig the hole. And she said, well, then you dig the hole and God will fill it. And I quoted that to them, and knowing that her son was on that board of directors and he would remember those days. And they came back and said, we'll do this, we'll let you sign this, we'll sign this lease. And so as we started to build it out, I mean, all of us were working, jackhammering and cleaning and putting in, the electrical and the walls. And in the middle of all of that, the Lord spoke to my heart one night, because we were stretched already. How are we going to pay for this? How's God going to provide? But we just sort of knew He would. And the Lord spoke to my heart and said, this is not big enough. You need to build a second story. That meant putting in a steel frame and building another story and stairway up to two of them, actually. And so I brought that to the council, and I thought, they're not going to accept this. I haven't even been able to convince them we're going to be able to pay for this. And they said, Pastor, if that's what the dream God put in your heart, we'll support it. We'll believe that God is going to provide, because God always guides. Where He guides, He provides. And so we built the second story. Fortunately, thank the Lord for that, because we would have never been able to keep up with it. We grew to about 1,000 people in attendance. We had an auditorium that'll seat about 300 people, I think, and we had many, many services. And so,
yeah, if you remember the building on Sierra Highway, just the cramped hallways, it was a small space for what God was doing. And so then, Pastor Ken, you were there for a number of years. You were building it, you had a lease, and then you felt God was moving you to your own property, to the Highlands' own property. So you found where we currently are in West Palmdale. So what was that process of finding this space? You've been moving in faith already, but now asking God for even a bigger amount, either of money, a property, more room for people. So what was that like?
Well, one of the great things about the Highlands Church is that, we didn't think of that as being focused on a celebrity or somebody who was extra charismatic or special. We really saw that as the body of Christ, and everybody jumped in, and the whole church was helping and wanting. In fact, much of the time, my time, I had to spend thinking of jobs for people to do, because everybody wanted to be a part. Everybody wanted to serve their kingdom contribution in the church. And so I was thinking of things, how we could get everybody busy. And I was really afraid. I really was afraid that we would lose that if we moved into a permanent building, because then people would start thinking about, our church is on the corner of, the street and that street, and they'd see the church as a building rather than people working together. It was kind of cool when we didn't have our own facility per se. We were borrowing or using somebody else's facility, because we really had to depend on everybody being a part of that and giving their contribution. And I was afraid we'd move here and we'd lose that. And it's been a challenge since we moved here. But God pointed us to this corner. We came up with the name the Highlands when we first started, based on the high places where people usually like to live, and it's a good place to live, and it's a good strategic spot to defend against the attack of your enemy. And we sort of formulated this identity of being the Highlands. And of course, this is the Highland area. And so we thought that, this was a name God had just given us, but we had no idea that God would put us on a corner that is called the Highlands area in Palmdale. This area on a really more of a real estate tract has been designated as the Highlands, and that's why we have Highland High School over nearby. But we had no idea at that time, when we started on the east side of Palmdale in a little modular classroom, that God would bring us over to this corner called the Highlands, and He had given us that name, the Highlands. And so we moved in here, and we were able to multiply like triple, to where we were, we closest we can tell, we're probably 5,000 people that called this their home church.
Well, thank you, Pastor Ken. What a great story. And the Highlands is not about a building. It's not a zip code or an address. The Highlands is about people. And God has used the Highlands as an amazing place of healing and restoration. And there are countless stories of people who have been healed and restored here at the Highlands, and I'm one of them. I came broken, and I came really shattered. My life was in pieces, and God used the Highlands in a special way for me to heal me, to restore me. And let me tell you, he's done an amazing, amazing work. Let me tell you one quick story. I've been coming to the Highlands for a couple of years as a single dad and really broken. I was in ministry before, and I thought ministry was gone because of my background, my past. And so I thought that I was it. I was done. Game over. And so one week, I came to the Highlands Sunday service, and I saw in our worship guide that they were looking for a graphic designer. And I had done that in the past. I was currently doing that in a secular marketplace. And I felt God telling me, like, hey, you need to send your resume in, and that you need to pursue this. But I told God no. And I really felt that I just didn't want to be hurt again. I didn't want to feel like I was going to be told I wasn't good enough for ministry. And so for 3 straight Sundays, I saw the same announcement and the same kind of piercing my heart from God of send your resume and send your resume. And for 3 weeks in a row, I said, God, no, 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 no. Well, one night after the 3rd Sunday, after telling God no, which, by the way, don't recommend saying no to God 3 weeks in a row, but one night, I was working on a project. I was doing some freelance design, and God would not let me focus. And so I literally out loud in my living room, my daughters were sleeping in their rooms, and I literally out loud said, fine, God, I'll send my resume. I was arguing with God in my living room, and so I sent my resume in, and one of our pastors saw that and connected with me the next day. And so my objective was I was going to come into this interview, let them know about my story, and then just excuse myself because I thought it was game over for me. I hadn't quite yet understood what kind of place the Highlands was with healing and restoration. And so I came in to meet with one of the pastors, and it was an amazing experience for me. Because as I shared my background, my story, he looked at me and said, man, Jeremy, God's not done with you yet. And that was such a healing moment for me. And so let me tell you, as you're checking out our church, that this is a place of healing and restoration. I don't have time to share all the things that God has done throughout the years in my own life, but let me tell you, if you found the Highlands, this is a place for you, because this is a place that God uses to change lives. And so let me tell you where we're going. You've heard a little bit about where we've been. Let me tell you a little bit more about where we're going. We love helping people say yes to God. That is such an important mark of what we do here at the Highlands. But moving into this new season, in this pastoral transition, in this season of change in ministry, we don't want to just help people say yes to God. We want to go deeper. We want people to become rooted disciples of Jesus. That's our heart. That's our passion. And so we are really focusing on getting grounded into God's word, getting grounded into community, into connection, and with God's people. So let me encourage you as you're checking us out, as you're looking at this and maybe praying about, all right, God, are you leading me to the Highlands? Let me encourage you that this is a place for you. This is a place for people. This is a place of hope, of healing and restoration. And we're so thrilled with what God has been doing in the past. But let me tell you, church, we are more excited about what God's going to do in the future. And we believe that future includes you. And so come with us, become a rooted disciple of Jesus, and help us reach our community with the love of Jesus and make an impact that will last for all of eternity.